My name is Martin Grier. I'm 54 years old, and I have spent 28 years building something from nothing with my hands, and a truck that broke down twice the first winter I owned it. I want to tell you about the night I walked out of my son's house without saying a word, while my wife stood in his foyer with her coat half on, and her eyes trying very hard not to show what she was feeling. 60 people were watching. My daughter-in-law was standing in the middle of the living room, with her arms crossed, and she had just told my wife, in those exact words, that she wasn't welcome there anymore, and that it was time for her to leave. My son was 12 feet away, holding a glass of wine. He didn't say a thing. People who heard about it later had a lot of opinions about what I should have done, what I should have said, how I should have carried myself. What I can tell you is what I actually did. I walked to the coat closet by the front door and took my wife's coat from the hook. I held it open for her. Then I picked up the hostess gift we'd brought. A bottle of good Bordeaux. Still in the bag, still tied with the ribbon Barbara had spent time finding at the craft store. And I walked us both out into the cold November night. My daughter-in-law thought she'd won. She had no idea what she'd actually done. 28 years ago, I started Grier Grounds with a used Chevy, 2 mowers, and a list of 11 residential clients I'd built relationships with over 3 years of working for someone else. My wife Barbara will tell you it was reckless. She's right. We had Lucas, who was 2 years old, and a mortgage payment that made my hands sweat every month. But I had something I'd learned from my own father, who ran a small engine repair shop until he was 67, and loved every day of it. He told me, build something with your name on it, or spend your life building something that doesn't. I built it. 28 years later, Grier Grounds has 14 full-time employees, 47 commercial accounts, and a reputation in this county I'll put up against anyone's. Barbara spent those same 28 years as a school librarian 8 minutes from our house. She reads 2 books a week, and still does. She makes the best chicken soup in the county, and has never, in 30 years of marriage, said a cutting thing about another person in my presence. She remembers people's names and the names of their children, and the things that matter to them. She's the kind of woman who makes a room warmer just by walking into it. Lucas is 30 years old. Sharp, driven, graduated near the top of his class. He built a financial consulting practice 3 years ago that I was proud of in the way you're proud of something you had no hand in, because he did it himself. I helped in the ways fathers help, showing up, listening, believing in him when the math didn't look good yet. None of that showed up on a balance sheet. It was his work, and it was good. He brought Amanda home for the first time in the spring, about 18 months before the night I'm telling you about. She was 26, beautiful in the way you notice immediately, and that Lucas clearly couldn't quite believe he'd found. She shook my hand with both of hers and smiled like she meant it. With Barbara, it was different. Barbara had made dinner. She'd put the good tablecloth out. When Amanda walked into the kitchen and Barbara opened her arms the way she always does, automatic, warm. Amanda offered a cheek and a single pat on Barbara's shoulder. Brief. Efficient. My sister Vera pulled me aside after dessert. She'd driven up for the weekend and had spent the evening watching from the corner of her eye the way she's done since we were children. She's a calculator, Vera said. Not mean about it, just direct. She's adding you up. Vera, you've known her 3 hours. Long enough. She poured herself more coffee. Just don't let yourself get moved around the board without noticing it. That's all I'm saying. I told her she was projecting. I told myself she was being protective the way she always was with me. I should have listened. The next 18 months were what I can only describe as a slow erosion. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could point to and call by its right name. It worked precisely because every individual moment had an explanation, and the explanation almost made sense. And if you pushed back on any one piece of it, you were the one who sounded unreasonable. Amanda forgot to pass along Barbara's calls. More than once. She routed everything through Lucas. Tell your mom we can't make Sunday, let your parents know we'll be a little late. Lucas became the wire between 2 terminals that were never supposed to touch directly. Somewhere around month 6, Barbara started arriving at our dinners with an apology already built into her posture. She'd second-guess herself mid-sentence, glance at me across the table, wonder if she'd said the wrong thing. She'd look at me with an expression I couldn't answer. Am I doing this wrong? That was the thing I never forgave. Not what Amanda did to me, what she did to Barbara's ease inside her own family. When Lucas and Amanda bought the house, a 4-bedroom colonial in Westfield, 40 minutes from us, 5 minutes from Amanda's parents, Barbara cried happy tears and immediately started thinking about what to bring as a housewarming gift. I sat on the back porch for a while before going inside. The party was in November, 60 guests. Amanda's parents, her college friends, her colleagues, a rotating display of people I'd never met. We drove 40 minutes on a Saturday evening. Barbara had wrapped the wine in tissue paper and tied it with a ribbon she'd driven to the craft store to find. She'd spent a long time getting dressed, and had asked me twice if she looked okay. She looked beautiful. I told her so. She smiled, then looked out the window for most of the drive. The house was everything Amanda had talked about for months. High ceilings, a kitchen that had been fully renovated, the kind of careful staging that made you feel slightly guilty for setting anything down. Amanda's mother Helene greeted us at the door, with the particular warmth of someone who's had practice being gracious to people she doesn't consider equal. She introduced us to a couple near the entrance, and got our names right both times, which I noted. Our coats went on a bed in the guest room. Our wine went on the kitchen counter. Amanda carried it away with both hands and set it somewhere I couldn't see. The living room had a loose hierarchy the way these things always do. Amanda's parents held court near the fireplace. Her college friends occupied the good furniture. The rest of us orbited. Barbara and I ended up near the kitchen pass-through, beside a couple from Amanda's yoga class, who were perfectly pleasant and had no idea who we were. Lucas gave a toast around 7:30. He thanked Amanda's parents first, then her best friend who had helped coordinate the move, then his colleagues, then, near the end, the way you add a footnote at the bottom of a document, and of course Mom and Dad. Thanks so much for making the drive. Thanks for making the drive. I crossed the room and shook my son's hand, pulled him close enough that only he could hear. I love you, I'm proud of what you've built, but there are going to be moments in this life when you have to decide what kind of man you are. Not for me, not for anyone else. I hope you'll recognize it when it comes. He looked at me. He didn't understand yet. Across the room, Amanda was watching us with something I've seen before, the look of a person who has decided something, and is simply choosing the right moment. The moment came about an hour later. Barbara was near the dining table, talking with one of Lucas's colleagues and his wife. I was 15 feet away, half in a conversation I couldn't quite track. I watched Amanda break away from a group near the front window. Her walk was different, not the social drift of the previous 2 hours. This was direct, decided. She touched Barbara's arm and drew her slightly aside, the way you do when you want to be heard by the people immediately around you, without appearing to address the room. I think we need to talk, she said, about some things you've been saying to people here. Barbara turned to face her. Of course, Amanda. Whatever you need. I've heard from multiple people that you've been telling them I'm difficult, that I'm controlling, that I don't treat Lucas the way he deserves. Her voice was low but carrying. The couple beside them had gone still. Those kinds of things follow a person. Amanda. Barbara's voice was quiet. I'm not finished. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room around us was beginning to shift. I have tried to be patient. I have tried to make you feel welcome in our life. But there is a limit to how long I'm going to stand in my own home and be undermined. She straightened slightly. One register higher now, clear across 2 tables worth of guests. This is my house, and I need you to leave. You are not welcome here anymore tonight. The room went to silence the way rooms do, when 60 people decide simultaneously to stop talking. Barbara stood very still. Her face went careful the way it does when she's trying not to let something show. She looked at Amanda. Then she looked across the room, at Lucas. He was holding a glass of wine. He set it down on the nearest surface. He looked at his mother. He looked at his wife. His face had the particular stillness of a man trying hard to calculate the right response. He said nothing. I was already moving. I crossed the room without hurrying. I took Barbara's coat from the hook by the front door. I walked back to her and held it open, and she slipped her arms into it without a word, because we have been married 30 years and some things don't need saying. I went back to the kitchen counter and picked up the wine bag, still tied with Barbara's ribbon. I looked at the room, not at Amanda, not at Lucas. I looked at the room itself, the 60 people who were going to carry this night home, and have to decide, in the quiet of their own conscience, what they thought about what they'd just seen. Then I offered Barbara my arm and we walked out the front door. The night air was 40 degrees. Barbara held my arm and didn't let go. He didn't say anything, she said. It wasn't a question. I didn't have an answer that would help. We got to the car. I drove us home without the radio. Halfway back, she put her hand over mine on the center console. I don't want to lose him, Martin. I know. Promise me we won't. I kept my eyes on the road. We're not going to lose Lucas, but we're going to have to decide what we're willing to accept in order to keep him. And I can tell you right now, it's not this. It can't be this. She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded and turned to look out her window at the dark between streetlights. There are things your children don't know about you, not because you hide them, just because they never thought to ask. Joe Weston and I met in 1994 at a trade conference in Trenton, both of us working for other people, sharing a folding table for 2 days, and finding out we thought the same way about most things. We'd been close ever since. His divorce, my father's death, every milestone that mattered. He built his property development company through a downturn that would have finished most people, and came out the other side with more work than he could handle, and a name that preceded him into every county in the region. His current project, Westfield Commons, a mixed-use development in the same town where Lucas and Amanda had just bought their house, was the largest development in the area in 15 years. The project required financial consultants for feasibility modeling, risk analysis, ongoing project finance, the kind of contract that sets a small firm up for years. Lucas had pitched Westfield Commons 3 months earlier. He'd called me after submitting the proposal, his voice doing the thing it does when he knows something matters. He didn't know Joe was on the selection committee. He'd never thought to ask what Joe actually did, and I hadn't told him, not to keep a secret, there just hadn't been a reason yet. Lucas called at 11:15, the night of the party. I took the phone to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub, with the door closed. Dad, careful, rehearsed. Amanda is really upset. The whole evening was a lot for her. She wants to call Mom tomorrow and apologize. She was under a lot of stress. She misunderstood some things she'd heard, and she handled it badly. I didn't say anything. She's going to fix this. Lucas, your wife told your mother to leave your home in front of 60 people, and you stood there. I kept my voice level. I need you to understand that before we talk about Amanda's intentions or her stress level, or what she plans to do tomorrow. Silence. I know, he said finally, very quiet. Sit with that. Not with what Amanda is going to do, with what you chose in that moment. Call me when you're ready to talk about that part. In the morning, Amanda called Barbara at 10. Barbara looked at the screen, looked at me, and set the phone face down on the table, with both hands wrapped around her coffee mug. We sat in the quiet of an ordinary Sunday while it rang. I texted Joe that afternoon, simple, are you free this week? He called back in 20 minutes. I was at the party, he said. I know Helene through the Westfield development. I saw everything. I hadn't known that. It didn't change what I was going to say. Joe, I want to be straight with you. I was going to call you about Lucas's firm, about Westfield Commons. I was going to put my name behind them. A pause. I know you were. I'm not going to do that now. I'm not calling anyone against him. I'm not making moves. But I'm not stepping in for him either. Another pause, longer, understood. That was all. They came Monday afternoon without calling. Lucas had his jaw set. Amanda was in a blazer and pressed slacks, composed, deliberate. She'd dressed for a negotiation she intended to win. We sat in the living room. I didn't offer coffee. That was new. Amanda folded her hands in her lap and looked at me directly. Mr. and Mrs. Grier, I owe you an apology for Saturday evening. I'm sorry if what I said caused hurt feelings. The room was very quiet. Amanda, I said, a conditional apology isn't one. Sorry if it hurt is not the same as I was wrong. She held my gaze. I don't know what else you want me to say. I'll be specific. You told my wife to leave your home in front of 60 people. You accused her of things she never did. And your husband, my son, said nothing. What I want is for you to understand what those things actually were. Not to make me feel better about them. To actually understand. Lucas started to speak. This isn't your turn right now, I said. Amanda's composure cracked just slightly at the edges. So what does this mean going forward? What are you planning to do? Nothing dramatic, I said. What it means is that Barbara and I have changed what we're available for, and those changes won't be negotiated in this living room on a Monday afternoon. You'll see what they look like over time. She searched my face for the anger she could use as leverage. There wasn't any. They left 30 minutes later. At the door, Amanda glanced back at me once, the look of someone who'd expected a different outcome and was revising their plan. She wasn't sure anymore, and she knew that I knew it. Joe called Wednesday at 3. The committee met this morning, he said. Lucas's technical submission is strong. Good modeling, clean presentation. A pause. Then they asked about professional references, character vetting, the standard background questions. I told them I'd known Martin Grier for 30 years, and that he was the most principled person I'd worked alongside in this industry. Then they asked if I had the same confidence in his son's firm. I waited. I told them I didn't have first-hand experience with the firm's work, that I couldn't make a direct recommendation. He paused. In our industry, that answer has a specific weight, not a negative recommendation. The absence of a positive one from someone in a position to give it. The committee understood what that meant. They removed them from consideration, Joe said. I want you to know I didn't say one negative word about Lucas. I know, I said, and I want you to know that a week ago, you wouldn't have had to ask. I know, Joe said, you didn't. After we hung up, I sat in the chair by the window and looked at Barbara's garden going dormant in the November cold. The weight of what had not happened settled in slowly. I hadn't engineered anything. I hadn't called anyone. I had simply stopped being the floor that caught my son before he hit the ground. He had hit it, and the ground was exactly as hard as it always is when no one is there to soften it. That wasn't cruelty. It was the most honest thing I'd done for him in years. Lucas called Thursday evening. The rehearsed evenness was completely gone. Dad, we got the letter from Westfield Commons. I heard. A long silence. Were you involved in that? I gave him the truth. I didn't make a single call against you. I didn't say one negative word about your firm. What I did was not step in the way I normally would have. I was going to vouch for you. I didn't. That's the same thing. No, it's not, but I understand why it feels that way. He was quiet for a long time, then you always stepped in my whole life. I know. So why now? Because your wife asked your mother to leave your home, and you stood at that counter and said nothing. And I had to figure out what it meant that I was still going to show up and smooth everything over. What that was teaching you. I stopped. What it was teaching me. He didn't say anything for a while. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. What do I do now, Dad? That's the first honest question you've asked me in a long time. I meant it gently, and I think he heard it that way. Figure out what kind of man you want to be. Not for me, not for Amanda, for yourself. What you'll stand behind and what you won't. That answer has to be yours. And after, are we okay? We'll always love you. That doesn't change. But okay is something you build. It's not a switch you flip. He was quiet again, then, all right. It wasn't everything, but it was the first brick of something that might actually hold. Amanda came alone on a Friday. Jeans this time, a light jacket, her hair in a ponytail. None of the careful preparation of Monday. You cost Lucas that contract, she said. No preamble. Come in if you want to talk. I'll say it here. You used your connection to punish my husband for something I did. That's retaliation. I didn't make one call against him, Amanda. I stopped making calls for him. Those are very different things. You let him fail. I let him stand on his own. That's what parents are supposed to do eventually. You're punishing him for what I did. I'm done protecting him from the weight of choices he's made, including the choice to stand in that kitchen and say nothing while you asked his mother to leave. She stared at me, looking for the opening. If you don't support us, you'll lose him. I looked at her for a long moment. She needed me to flinch. I didn't. Amanda, I lost something I thought I had the night I watched my son make his choice. Whatever we build from here is up to the two of you. I don't get to be told what my relationship with my son costs. That's not how this works. I stepped back and closed the door, quietly, no final word, no scene. The weeks after were ordinary the way things become ordinary, after something has permanently shifted. The coffee still brews, the mail still comes. Barbara's garden still needed putting to bed for winter, and she went out on a Saturday and did it the same way she always has. Amanda did freelance home staging, styling houses for sale, referral-based, built on realtors who trusted her eye. In the 3 weeks after the housewarming, 2 agents she'd worked with for years went quiet. No confrontation, no explanation. Just the particular silence of a phone that had been ringing and wasn't anymore. 60 people carry 60 memories. Communities are smaller than they appear. Barbara's friend Ruth, who had been at the party, mentioned to a colleague what she'd seen. That colleague mentioned it to someone else. None of it was organized. None of it needed to be. 3 weeks after the party, a handwritten card arrived for Barbara. Amanda's handwriting on the envelope. Barbara opened it at the kitchen table while I sat across from her with my coffee. She read it once, then again. 4 sentences. It said, "I was wrong. What I said to you in my home was wrong, and it was harmful. I'm sorry. I would like to talk when you're ready." No qualifier, no if. The word wrong used plainly twice. That was honest, at least. Barbara set the card down and sat with it for a few minutes. Then she went to the small desk in the corner where she keeps her personal stationery, ivory, with her initials pressed into the top, and she sat down and wrote back. She handed it to me to read before she sealed it. "Amanda, thank you for writing. I'm glad you did. I don't hold hatred toward you, and I want you to know that. But I'm not able to pretend nothing happened, and I won't. When you're ready to have a real conversation, not to be forgiven, but to actually understand, I'm here for that. Take whatever time you need. Barbara." No apology in it. No opening wider than the moment warranted. "Is it too much?" she asked. "It's exactly right," I said. She sealed it herself, walked to the mailbox at the end of the driveway, dropped it in, came back inside, and started making lunch like it was any other Friday. But something was different. She was standing differently. The woman who had spent 2 years second-guessing everything she said at family dinners was replaced, slowly and then all at once, by the woman who wrote on ivory stationery and mailed it without asking anyone's permission. She had stopped apologizing for being there. I don't know exactly when it happened that morning, but there it was. Lucas and I have breakfast every other Saturday now. We rotate between 3 diners within 20 minutes, the kind of places with laminated menus and thick-rimmed mugs and coffee that comes automatically. As soon as you sit down, we don't have an agenda. We talk about his work, about whatever he's been carrying that week. Sometimes we sit in comfortable silence, and that's enough. Amanda hasn't been to our house. That's the current boundary, and we've all quietly understood it without spelling it out. They're in therapy. Lucas mentions it without detail, and I don't press. What matters is that he's showing up for something hard and staying in the room. His firm landed a regional retail account 2 months after Westfield Commons. He got it on his own, through his own network, through his own reputation. He called when the contract came through, and his voice sounded different. Not just happy. Earned. I sat across from him one morning in February, close to a year since the housewarming, and watched him work through a design problem with his hands moving the way they do when he's genuinely thinking. His eyes lit up the same way they did at 17, when he'd figured something out in the garage and needed to tell someone immediately. There he is, I thought. That's my son. Not finished. Not done with the work of becoming who he needs to be. Not the version of himself who stood at a kitchen counter while everything shifted beneath him and chose silence for the wrong reasons. But working. Growing. Finding out what he's made of when there's no floor underneath to catch him. One morning at a diner on the east side of town, he set down his fork and looked at the table for a moment, working something out at his own pace. Dad, that night at the party. He looked at me. When you got up and helped Mom with her coat and just walked out. I've replayed that probably 100s. He paused. I had this whole idea of what it meant to be a man. Stand your ground. Don't back down. And then I watched you walk out of that room without a single word, without making a scene, without giving anyone anything to use against you. He shook his head slightly. I realized I had no idea what it actually took to be that. I thought the hard thing was staying and fighting. Turns out the hard thing was knowing when leaving was the right choice. I didn't say anything for a moment. Kayla and I, he caught himself. Amanda and I are still in therapy. I don't know exactly what the future looks like, but I know I'm not going to be the person who stands at a counter anymore. I know that. I can see it, I said. These mornings, I can see you working at it. We paid the check and walked out into the late winter morning. Two men with a distance still to go and enough honesty between them now to make the trip. In landscaping, we talk about the difference between a plant that's surviving and one that's actually thriving. They can look almost the same in a photograph. You have to be close. You have to know what you're looking at. The work nobody sees is the work that holds. The soil preparation, the root structure, the things you do in this season before anything breaks through the surface. You don't know for a long time whether it worked. Then one day the thing is standing on its own in a storm, and you remember. Late went now, and Barbara is already planning the spring garden. Seed catalogs spread across the kitchen table. On Sunday mornings, the names of things she wants to try circled in pencil. She talks about what she's moving and what she's removing and where the new dahlia bed is going to go. She sat on the arm of my chair last Saturday morning, both hands around her coffee, looking out at the yard. "Do you think Lucas is going to be all right?" she asked. I thought about the diner 2 weeks ago, his hands moving when he talked, the contract he'd earned by himself. "I think he's figuring it out," I said, "and I think that's what has to happen." She sat with that. "Good enough for now?" "Good enough for now." She patted my knee and went back to her catalogs. I sat there in the ordinary quiet of a Saturday morning that had taken a long time to arrive at. People ask me sometimes why I didn't say something that night. They mean it as a criticism. Why didn't you stand up? Why didn't you say what needed saying? Why didn't you defend her right there in front of everyone the way she deserved? Here's what I've come to understand. Anything I said would have become the story. Not what Amanda did, not the 60 witnesses, not my wife being asked to leave her son's home. Me, my anger. Whatever I said in the first white second of it, I'd have handed Amanda exactly what she needed. Proof that the Griers were the problem. So I helped my wife with her coat and walked out carrying my dignity intact, which is the one thing no one can take from you unless you hand it to them. But I want to be honest about something else. The silence I chose that night was not the silence I'd been choosing for the previous 18 months. Those are completely different things. 18 months of overlooking, of not pushing back, of absorbing in the name of keeping peace. That silence had a cost. It cost Barbara her ease. It cost Lucas, who had learned to read my patience as permission. The silence in that foyer was a choice made with everything I had. The silence before it was closer to a failure of nerve dressed up as grace. There's a point where absorbing stops being love and becomes something else, where endurance becomes disappearance. You can carry a great deal for the people you love, but you are not required to carry yourself out of the picture. Not for a daughter-in-law, not for a social moment, not even for your own habits of keeping the peace. You are allowed to be there, fully, unashamedly there. We're doing the work now, all of us, laying new ground, the kind that takes time and doesn't announce itself. One Saturday morning at a time. I think it's going to hold.